Hello, everyone. Yeah, just to be sure, I take a few seconds now because typically it takes a few seconds and minutes till everybody joined our session. I hope you had a great day so far. And maybe what I will already start with, I hope that's gonna be okay if some people miss that, is who am I, who are we? So yeah, I'm Christian, I'm psychologist, I'm Scrum Master and also co-founder of the team development tool, retrospective health check tool, Echometer. You've probably seen that. Echometer is sponsoring Project Scagile. Now you may ask, okay, what is Project Scagile? You've probably seen it on our website. Basically, the idea of Project Scagile is to have this fact. Okay, roughly 50% of agile transformations still fail, which is a massive number, and there's probably a lot of money wasted in this. And what we thought as Echometer, we do have the network, we do have thousands of users, and basically we have the experience to help others and the best practices to help others to at least increase the chances that their transformation is not failing. And so, yeah, that's the idea of Project Scagile, to get our network together and to make sure that experiences and best practices are shared. And that's why we interviewed dozens of experts out there. And in the end, we try to put together a nice webinar with multiple perspectives from different angles, and how to make sure that you can profit from all the experiences. So yeah, as you probably have seen, this is an on-demand webinar, so this is pre-recorded. Why? Because it is really hard to get 11 experts from different time zones together at the same time. So yeah, that's the reason for that. The advantage is that you have all the knowledge in a very small time, because we were able to cut out everything that was not that relevant. Okay, what else did I want to say? Okay, yeah, that's an important point. Who are all these experts? So they all have seen multiple transformations that were very important to us. They all are practitioners for decades. And most of them, I think, are from Fortune 500 companies. So they all have the relevant experience, and they all have, the qualifications. I think many of them have this scaled agile framework training background. But we also made sure that, there are others who have the background in large scale Scrum, because to us, it was important that their perspective is not basically biased by their framework. Often you can hear their perspective, but I think it's still okay, to get this inspiration from these frameworks. Okay, yeah, today's session. What is it about, and what is it not about? So yeah, today we are focusing on the key event in Agile, at least if you ask most of the people, which is the Agile retrospectives. And we are basically having, again, this high-level perspective. How can you leverage the power of retrospectives to make sure that your agile transformation is succeeding? And so what we are not focusing on, for example, is how to facilitate remote retrospectives, but rather we are thinking about, okay, how can you get more out of your retrospective? How can you make sure that you are shaping your team and organizational culture with retrospectives? And what we are also looking at is this, Scrum of Scrums, scaled retrospectives. How is that typically done, and how can you make sure that you get the most out of that? Okay, so yeah, I guess that was everything that's key to know before we start. Yeah, I will start the video now then. I recommend to take out a pen, because again, there's a lot of information in a short amount of time. And yeah, then we'll see us at the end of the session. Then I will quickly also do the outro. I am happy that you are here, and have fun watching.
If you're not doing retrospectives, you're not doing Agile.
Retrospectives are so important because, yes, even if you're delivering value at 90%, nobody's perfect. How can we improve?
There's no better place for everyone to learn and also for you to prove that you can change your circumstances, that you are in the driver's seat of the change.
Well, at Ecometer, we analyzed thousands of retrospectives. And what can I say? They are just the best way, hands-on, to shape organizational culture.
The retrospective is the key ceremony of Scrum. It also, I believe, is the most misused ceremony in Scrum.
So, retrospectives at its core is the principles inspect and adapt, right? So in order to improve, in order to get better, you have to regularly stop whatever it is you're doing, right? The tyranny of now, the constant, just doing the same thing day in and day out, to really take a step back and look at how is our process going, right? What can we do? What are some areas that are either of pain that people are unhappy with, and how can we address that?
To me, it's the most important ceremony in any team's development. And then I think in mature teams, it's probably can still be the most important ceremony because they're recognizing opportunities.
Yes, it is the most important agile ceremony that we have. Have fun, have fun, have fun. Reason, that's your voice of reason within your team that's doing the work of where are we failing, where are we succeeding, how can we improve, what are we learning.
Teams want to get better. Hey, this has been a headache. This last program increment, this was the bane of our existence. This was the thorn in our side. Yes, let's get together. Let's make this better. So again, when people see that what they're working on, they can improve themselves, they can have a positive outcome, they get fired up about it. They get excited. They want people, I believe people inherently want to do good and be better.
So I would actually take retrospective even in the smallest scale, right? So like with Kanban method, we really do hone in on what can we do today to improve flow, right? That's a question that we like to ask, right? How can we improve today? What can we get done right today? So I even think it starts at that micro level.
So there are some teams who don't have retrospectives. The first important learning here is have a retrospective. Do it on every scale and on every level. Even do it in Kanban teams. It is just the engine of your transformation. It is the key event for continuous improvement, which is one of the core ideas of Agile. I also really like the example of Greg here in this context.
When I was a kid, Dad I used to have to mow the lawn on Saturday or whatever. And you know how kids are, I was like, oh, I can't find the gas. Oh, I can't find the grass catcher. Oh, it won't start. And this project would take, 3-4 hours. As I got a little more mature, I realized that if I got the gas, I got the catcher, I mowed the lawn, the whole thing was done in 20 minutes to a half hour, and I could slip away and go do what I wanted to do. Somewhere in there was a retrospective that I had where I was like, how can I make this more efficient? That's the way it is with the teams. I look at them when I'm taking on new teams that don't have Agile experience, and there's a lot of I can't find the gas can, I can't find the grass catcher, the dog's chain is in the way in the lawn. And it's like, those are things that are easily solvable by the team. And if the team were to, if you're to ask them those things, they would go, oh yeah, I guess we could do this. That's what the retro does. If you're measuring maturity, that participation in the retro, the use of the retro really demonstrates how mature the team is. Early on, it's, a little more complaining about outside stuff. And then with a good Scrum Master, you get the team to turn inward immediately, at least a little bit. Is there anything we could do to affect this change? Is there anything that we can do if they're not going to do that for us? And then basically you're creating this culture of the team trying to figure out how can we get stuff done.
That is a really interesting and important point. At Ecometer, within our retrospective tool, we know based on the participation how mature teams are. It really is fascinating. And I mean, so many people talk about maturity of teams, The retro is just the best indication of how mature teams are. The more productive the retro, the more mature is the team. And if you are very mature, it looks like this.
And then the more mature teams, it helps them when they really start to hit their stride, they start thinking of new ideas of things they want to do. These last automation teams built up their own automation tools. So they had their own tools that we built during the IP sprints that they were using to do what they wanted to do. And it automated a whole bunch of stuff. And that was the goal of the team, and ultimately I could show the business, here's how many man hours they were taking to do this, whatever regression testing. Here's this new tool that they built. They spent this many hours on it. Look what it cuts out. And, in 3 months from now, you recognize savings. And after that, it's all just gravy. And then they were able to start building other tools because of that. So yeah, that was purely out of the retrospective.
Another aspect of why retros are so important gave us Kevin.
There's no better place for everyone to learn and also for you to prove that you can change your circumstances, that you are in the driver's seat of the change. You are talking about things that are blocking you, things that should be improved, and you're implementing that. And by doing that, you are creating trust in the change process. People feel empowered to change the company in the way that the company needs to change.
Maybe you already watched our webinar on agile culture, but that's, I guess, not even necessary here. Creating trust is key within transformations, and retros are the perfect ceremony to do so. Spot a problem and then do something about it.
You will also talk about blockers and problems that are beyond your reach, that you cannot affect, that you cannot change. You will identify those as well. And that doesn't mean that you should hide them. It's just a very good starting point for this grassroots movement to prove to people you can change something. And there's stuff that still needs to be changed. And we have to iterate. We have to iterate there. We need to change slowly in order to change that circumstance.
I really like Kevin's wording here, the grassroots movement. I mean, that's what should happen in a transformation. And retros are the perfect place to bring this grassroots movement to life. I think it was during my studies in Madrid that our professor gave us a nice metaphor. Creating trust is like charging a battery. Every time you're actually doing what you said, you're charging the battery. Here is a nice example of Sean of how the trust battery is charged.
At my previous organization, I had two sister trains that we were very intertwined with. We even did we did our retrospectives together, but we'd separate because again, you have 200 or 300 people. You can't come to a good consensus that way. So we'd all come up with 2 or 3 problem statements that we needed to work on. One of them was a CI/CD pipeline, continuous integration, continuous deployment. And it was hard with 3 trains trying to work on this thing. So we actually came up with, we basically created a team that worked on this together. So the 3 release engineers, shall we say, integration engineers, actually came up with a method that we would always make sure they had the latest code from each of the different trains. And, it took teamwork. They actually said, no, this is something we want to work on. So these release engineers got together and took this on, and it improved. We were no longer stepping on each other's toes. We always had the latest code from each of the different trains. And then once that was implemented and that next program increment went smoother, they're like, yes, this was the value that we've delivered now. It's less downtime, less people using old code that wasn't up to date because we didn't get it from the latest repository.
In many cases, people ask me, hey, Eric, you're our agile coach. This is not working. What do we do, right? This is where a retrospective is powerful. What do we do? And in my world, unless I absolutely have to give them the answer, unless it's like, you must give me an answer. My world is, what do you think we should do? Take it to the team. Have the team tell you what they think they should do.
And that's the thing. It's not what can they do. It's what can we do as a train? Yes, there can be other teams, other trains, other parts of the organization that are impeding you. But what can we do to better ourselves? How can we improve?
If teams only talk about problems that they cannot affect, that definitely is a sign for like a lower maturity level. Especially those teams, you have to train into this direction. Okay, what can we do? And then that's like maybe even more important. Make sure that they actually implement those action items and that they have this feeling of accomplishment. And another thing that is important in this context is this:
have them buy in to whatever they want to do, and they're going to walk away from the retro with something actionable to improve. If I just tell the team, you know what, you need to test better, well, thanks, that was real helpful. But if I show the team, hey guys, what do you think about what we showed here to the customer? And they go, wow, that was not the best. I mean, we wish we did better. And I asked them to go, well, what do you guys think we should do? Or what do you guys think you should do? And they go, well, maybe if we, did a little more testing, or we had this tool, or we had this training, they would say something, right? And then this is where I would tell that Scrum Master, for example, this is where you need to jump in now. This is where you need to be a servant leader and say, okay, how can I help them get that?
It had gathered enough support, because people vote on it. What do you want to work on? What do you feel are the biggest things? It had enough votes that people were like, yes, this hurt us. We know we can do better. Let's, talk about that. Let's do the 5 whys, the Ishikawa diagram. Let's figure out how we can make this better. Is it people? Is it process? Is it environment? Tools? So you go through all that and the people are good. It's process.
It is one of the more obvious ones, but it's still key. This not invented here syndrome can be a problem. So make sure people invent their own action items and let them vote on it. Let them decide. Give them this feeling of autonomy. This is a great mechanism to increase buy-in and commitment. Another key function of the retrospective is nicely put by Sami.
If you work out, you will go to the gym. Imagine there is no mirror, there is no scale, but you went every day for a gym for 2 weeks. How you measure your success? Beside you feel good. You want to see in the mirror how my muscles start to show or like to curve. And did I lose weight or not? Where's the scale? See, that's your scale, how you will evaluate your success.
At the retrospective, 2 things should happen. One is we should talk about our success, because that gives the team a great time after the demo, after the review, to really feel good about the work that they did and to continue to inspire and motivate the teams.
You're always giving them the kudos. You always want to start off with, we did great. Thank you guys. You did an amazing job. We delivered X number of features. We delivered X% of value.
And that's exactly the reason why it is so important to ask the question, what went well? And, to show people, good job, guys. Awesome. We do have things that are positive. People often forget about those. To maybe go even one step deeper here, do you know how to foster intrinsic motivation? Probably many people know about, extrinsic motivation. Pay them enough money and they'll be motivated. But, even more interesting probably is this intrinsic motivation. And there's a very popular theory in psychology that helps to foster intrinsic motivation, which is the self-determination theory by Dickey and Ryan. The theory basically says there are 3 things that you need for increase intrinsic motivation: autonomy, relatedness, and this feeling of competence. And retros are the perfect place to give people this feeling of, okay, you are competent, you know what you are doing, and you do have some successes. That is really important. And we already talked about autonomy through, for example, action items. And the last one, relatedness. Retros are the perfect event to have this feeling of, okay, we as a team can do something about this. Okay, now let's hear some very specific best practices for retros.
Retrospectives should not be bound by anything. I think that is one of the key message I would give to any team. Just allow anything to be discussed.
Don't do the same retrospective over and over again. Stylishly change it. It's not always what we did well, what we're not doing well. No, you got to always come up with fun. There's a time I did a Game of Thrones retrospective. It's still the same fundamental stuff, but the bad guys are, the stuff that we don't like doing. The good guys are this. It catches people's attention. They want to speak retrospectively.
There is this thing called retro tiredness. I think that doesn't happen too often in mature teams, but still, to prevent happening this, I recommend to have very different and varying retrospective methods. And the next thing is also really important, follow-up.
When it comes to my best practices of retros, is to make them actionable.
At the end of a retrospective, you should have 1 or 2 action items, things that you are actually going to do to improve.
Okay, put down action items. That is an easy one, but let's go one step deeper.
I think many Scrum Masters fail in the retrospective by not coming out with those 1 or 2 action items. Often we have a bullet list of items that we're not going to address. They have to be raised to management, and then they just become a bitch session, to be quite frank.
We're looking at doing retrospectives every week, right? Because we want them to look at their delivery pipeline and say, okay, how did we do with flow this week, right? How can we improve? What's our biggest constraint? That's the best way to do this. It's like, you don't want to tackle 20 problems each week. You want to tackle your biggest problem.
Well, you don't have to do retros every week. I mean, many teams won't want that, and that's okay. But this rule of thumb, doing it more often and more regularly, but shorter, that makes a lot of sense. 2 things I want to stress here. Having less action items, also increases the probability that you actually implement them, which increases the probability of creating this trust that we want. So that's important. And the other thing is, train your Scrum Masters really well. I mean, they are the change agents of your transformation. So really be ready to invest into your Scrum Masters. John put this topic of focus in different words.
We're not necessarily looking to, boil the ocean in a day or build Rome, right? We understand that we're not going to solve every problem out there. But the good thing is we don't have to, right? If you look at Pareto's law, 80-20, right? 80% of the pain within the organization is typically caused by 20% of the problems, right? So it's a very small number of problems that we need to address. So by doing some root cause analysis and retrospecting and inspecting and adapting on a consistent basis, we can very quickly address those issues before they become something much larger, much more complicated to solve, where you have to do a full agile transformation and being able to resolve that from a team or an organization perspective, right? So the only way we're ever going to get better is if we stop, inspect, and adapt, and having the discipline, to carry forward those new habits.
Here are a few thoughts on what also can help you implementing action items.
It's best if someone is responsible for it, just like any other issue or risk. I like the concept of SMART goals. So you make whatever change you're going to implement small and measurable, and also put a time box on it. So now often we think, oh, we'll try it and then we'll check it next retrospective and see how it goes. Well, that may be the right amount of time, but it may take 2 sprints or 3 sprints to really get in your groove, because the first sprint you're just trying to figure out.
And for all of the things that Steve just mentioned, retro tools like Ecometer or other tools can help you. Another thing that you have to keep in mind regarding action items is by Philip.
Certainly I think a lot of people are familiar with, for individual teams, this notion of, we talk about making work visible, and that is very, very important. What I think we tend to forget, though, is making improvement visible. So for instance, if you're doing a team retrospective, you need to figure out some way to make sure there is follow-up, from that conversation that you had, so that, any improvement or improvements that you talked about, you actually take action on them and you actually are making that visible, whether that's going in your backlog or, whatever technique that you want to use. But I'd say that's even more important at the cross team or even organizational level. And that's where a thing like a continuous improvement board can make such a big difference.
Put them in a backlog, put them in, we used to suggest that you put them up on the wall wherever the team meets. Now, since social distancing is happening, teams aren't necessarily meeting in a physical location anymore. But make sure that action item is upfront, and talk about it. Talk about it every other day or so. But make sure it is visible actionable, and treat it just like anything else you're going to do. Otherwise, it is just a complaint.
So once you've put down action items, make them visible, even on organizational level. Maybe through this continuous improvement board, put them in your backlog. Just make sure that people are aware of them and talk about them in your next retro. Again, tools can help you here. It's just the easiest way, if you talk about them again, to make sure that people take action items seriously. One thing that we should never forget when thinking about action items is action items basically are
your next set of hypotheses. So maybe though you will try these things and maybe you will fail fast, or maybe you will learn how to improve your processes.
You're essentially framing small experiments that you're going to run. So you typically will have columns like, what are some pain points we're experiencing? Okay, what are some ideas for experiments that we can run to potentially address these pain points? And then, you start running various experiments, and then you just kind of see what happens and move on accordingly.
That is a key thing to understand. Success for an action item doesn't mean that you implemented it. The goal of the action item is that you learn something. Positive outcome is not we implemented it, but positive outcome would be we learned something from it. So within your retro, you shouldn't talk about, okay, did we implement it? That's not what you should ask. You should ask, what did we learn from this? To make sure that the hypothesis that you base your action item on is well thought through, we have a nice tip from Maureen.
The other thing that I'm a big fan of is the inspect and adapt, because you get to the root cause. I love that slide that Einstein says, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I would spend 55 minutes figuring out the root cause and 5 minutes solutioning. Because it's like, if you solution a symptom, it doesn't matter. You're going to keep having that root cause. So you really want to find the root cause. And what I like about inspect and adapt is that it's easy to do online, like with Mural. You get a lot of people together, and people just, the amount of ideas that you can generate in a small amount of time, the amount of root causes, right? And digging into those root causes, whether you're asking why 5 times or 3 times or whatever, but just that group problem solving is so powerful. I really think that you can start to make a dent on those larger impediments in your organization if you involve a lot of people solving that problem together.
Through the 5 whys. Is it people? Is it process? Is it environment? Is it tools? What was the issue? What caused this issue? And then you keep drilling down deeper once you say, okay, it was environment. Okay, well, what is it in the environment? Why isn't it stable? Is there a lack of, RAM, memory? What is it? Do we need another environment? Is it too many people in that environment? You start digging down.
So take the time to analyze, where do problems come from. The inspect and adapt, by the way, is typically held every quarter. Zami explains more.
There's different level of retrospective. There's a weekly retrospective, there's a quarterly retrospective, and there is a yearly retrospective. Different names, which is inspect and adapt, or reevaluation for the company vision. Are we going to change the goal? Are we working on different objectives? Are we working on different method, new methods? That's the evaluation of the whole organization. That's the yearly one. And quarterly, we do inspect and adapt on a bigger level. And actually, on a personal level, we do it every day.
So as you can see, very many kinds of retros. There's even another type of retro that is also very important.
You have different ways to facilitate this in more of a cross-team setting. So, historically, some people refer to that conversation as a program retrospective or a retrospective of retrospectives, different terms. SAFE obviously has its own terminology, but what's nice about those conversations is you get the cross-team perspective, and typically in the cross-team type of setting, you also have some representation from leadership, probably some stakeholders, and so you get a really nice broad perspective.
One of my favorite things to do is what's called a scale retro. So this is the idea where you have it where you're doing a very big room retro. You can do this virtually too as well. And what happens is that you have a member from each level of the organization who's a member of a team.
So we had that before. Have a retro on every level within your organizations, even between levels. Why is that so important?
There's a missing cycle here. Not all the organizations focus on that. That's why they waste a lot of time and they waste a lot of money spending on agile, but they are not agile. Agile is to be transparent, to link between all the levels. The top level should listen to the bottom level. Even if it's a new idea, this idea can change the future of this organization. There's the leadership, there's a big role or a big responsibility to deliver this message. You can open the channel, you can use some tools to push these ideas or push these points to the upper level, and the upper level push it to the upper level. But it should be taken care of.
At the various levels within an organization, should be having retrospectives, so not just retrospectives at the team level, but at the program, even portfolio level, whichever cadence that they're following. Right.
So the communication floor is really important, and the retro of retros or similar events can really help you to make sure that this flow is happening. Sean, as a release train engineer, has a really nice example of how he's doing it.
What I usually do is I create a program retrospective, and I'll start that in the beginning of that program increment. And I tell people, and even though I tell them, it usually happens at the very end. But hey, if you run into anything during this program increment, here are the three things. What went well? What did not go well? What can we improve upon? If something happens during this program increment, here's where you can throw that, idea, that statement, that question. And we're, when we have our retrospective, I'm going to pull up this sheet and we're going to go through each one of these and we're going to talk about it. And we're going to, then we're going to vote on what we should work on, because we can only work on 2 or 3 things. So, by putting that out there, people can, post something, a statement, a question, an issue that happened. Now, if it gets resolved, they can also put, this was fixed, here's how it was fixed. So we don't necessarily, we can touch on it, but it's not something we have to work on unless we have to improve a process or things like that, So that way it's open the entire program increment and they can drop any thought, any idea. I like to have it there. So if they have an idea, a thought, an issue, they can throw it in there while it's still fresh in their mind, not like, oh, what happened in week 2 and we're in week 12? I know something happened, but I can't quite remember. I have this spreadsheet in Teams. And then, when I do the retrospective, I'll pull up the spreadsheet. I usually use some sort of voting, methodology, whether it's, in WebEx, you can now vote as well. And they vote on it, and whichever items get the most votes, those are the ones we're going to work on. We're going to break up into groups and we're going to have our problem solving workshops. We're going to spend an hour or 2, doing that. We're going to come back. We're going to restate the problem. We're going to, go through what we feel are the reasons that caused the problem. And here are our solutions or our action items to try to resolve them and make sure they don't happen again in the future.
So what I really like here is this idea of having this space always open during the whole sprint to leave ideas and comments. But now let's go one step deeper with our best practices.
How do you make sure the inspect and adapt or the retrospective of all the teams is heard? And that can be a little more challenging because often if you follow some of the cadence in some of the scaling frameworks, that may occur only once a quarter. So I think we want to be a little bit faster about that in many cases. So we do have to have a pretty good feedback loop. So on at least a sprint by sprint basis, whatever that time frame is for you, 2 weeks is probably the most common, is make sure that the retrospective items that the teams are doing are fully visible to whatever scaling layer you have, whether that's a program, whether that's an agile release train, whether that's the portfolio level.
Again, rather do it more often and do it shorter in case of retrospectives. The cycles here is really important. The shorter the cycles, the faster you are improving. Something that is connected to this is how leadership approaches all of this.
If there's anything that requires management actions, leadership should have an improvement roadmap, just like the team should have an improvement roadmap. The team should be able to add things to that, and those should be the blockers or the impediments that are keeping the team from achieving, high performance. They should be formed in a way that is actionable. So so leadership can understand what they are and truly take action on them. And that should happen on a more regular basis than quarterly or every 6 months. So it should happen on a regular basis. And often the communications for that would go from the teams after the retrospective to the scrum of scrums, whatever that might be, and then maybe to leadership after that. But that's how they should be formed, and those discussions should take place. There's no reason why they should wait every quarter or every 6 months if it's something that can be actionable and addressed sooner.
So give teams this possibility to raise awareness for their impediments, in best case more regularly than just quarterly, especially on leadership level. I mean, we have a whole webinar on leadership. I recommend to have a look at it. But this is how you create the trust. If you show on leadership level, okay, we are take them seriously, your issues. This is how others are doing it with the leaders.
When we would do inspect and adapt, it was always like, what problems? What are we going to bring up? What are we going to bring up? Right. And we would let the teams actually feed those problems in, right? Because what we would say is anything that you can solve at a team level, keep it at your team level. Anything else, those are impediments that bubble up, right, to the program level. And we would expect that the teams are the ones that are feeding the information to be solved at the inspect and adapt.
I talked about earlier the executive action team. That's a concept from Scrum at Scale, right? And the acronym for the executive action team is EAT, EAT. And the concept behind that is the executive action team is the one that's responsible for eating these organizational issues that are being bubbled up, right? So if we have a block or an issue that's facing a team, that's slowing them down, that they're not happy with, that they can't resolve themselves at the team level, right? They want to bubble that up to the executive action team. The executive action team, therefore, has the responsibility to eat that issue for the team, get that resolved, and help the team, perform better, perform higher.
So eat your problems away. I mean, everybody likes eating, so maybe that will convince your leadership team. What you should keep in mind here, though, is this.
Create visibility around your retrospective. That way, at IT level or enterprise level, you can pull a coagulation of all this and say, oh, this is the general trajectory of what the teams are saying. And the teams can also learn, oh, when this team faced this problem, this is what they did to fix it. In terms of leadership to team dynamic, yes, it's very important that when the teams voice out concern via retrospective and it's brought to leadership and action items are taken, the team should also hear from leadership that based on your concerns, we did this to fix this. Well, now we cannot fix your problems, but we hear you and we feel with you.
Again, show them we hear you, we listen to you. I mean, good part of leadership is active listening. I mean, you heard that hopefully pretty often, but it's always worth to remind people on that. But what you should always keep in mind when having this mutual event with leadership is the following.
There's a very good case study from a company that turned the pyramid upside down and introduced a service ticketing system. And the frontline workers could always raise impediments if they could not do their work to their managers. And managers were only evaluated after how fast and how well they resolved those problems. And at the very bottom of this upside down pyramid was the CEO who had to enable, his peers to do their work properly. What I like about this is the shift in perspective. What I don't like about that is this here, solve my problem mentality. You do that. And if you do retrospectives over hierarchical levels, it should always be we as a team retrospective and not there's people who are complaining and people who are solving. It should never be that. So if you say, okay, we have a retrospective on team level, we have a retrospective on leadership level, and then we have a retrospective on overall level, it shouldn't be a unidirectional meeting where the one part of the team says, hey, you should change that, and the other says, yes, I will.
Very good point. Have this we as a team mentality. I mean, you are a team, you have the same goals, at least if you communicated them the right way. And that's something that you could criticize about this EAT metaphor, because it's not only the leadership team, it's both sides. It's we as a team. Imagine now if you would see the leadership team only once a quarter. That would not help to create this feeling of, okay, we as a team. So again, try to do it more often. And another way to create this mentality is the following best practice.
And then sometimes take some people from lower teams. Let's go to management retrospective. You don't have to say anything. Just listen. See how management decides to retrospect. Sometimes take leaders. Go to the team. You don't have to say anything.
Communication flow and transparency is key in your transformation to increase trust. So this is a really nice example of what you could do. So to summarize the key points of what you just heard, heavily invest into your Scrum Masters so that they can facilitate really good retros that are actionable and that help to create this trust on team level that is really important. And in the end, to use them to increase the maturity level step by step of your teams. And if you want to learn more about this topic of maturity level and culture, I highly recommend to join our webinar on Agile culture.
It's interesting, right? Because everybody wants to change their culture. Oh, we're going to have this culture change. And just because leadership wants to change the culture doesn't mean culture is going to change.
You know, for me, as organizational psychologist, what can I say? Culture does eat strategy for breakfast.
More than tools and methodology, it's essentially a mindset change.
Humans just resist change, and that's the biggest challenge.
Getting people to accept change.
Changing our behaviors, changing our beliefs is really difficult.
The cultural shift. That is often the most challenging, and that's where we need to spend the most time.
And here we are. Yeah, I really hope that you liked it. It would be helpful to us if you give us a very quick feedback. You should be able to see on the right side of your screen now a little quick survey, just one click. It would be really helpful if you just click how you liked it. Yeah, two things that I wanted to stress in the end. Yeah, the advantage of having this on-demand webinar is that we'll someday be repeating these webinars. So if you like the webinar, feel free to share Project Scagile with your colleagues, because they will be able to see this webinar too then. And other webinars obviously too. The disadvantage, and I'm very sorry about that, of this on-demand webinars is the interactivity, obviously. It's hard to share your experiences and the experiences of the attendees live. And we had a little idea about that, little proposal. We talked about that last time, but this time it's a little different. What we did is we prepared a little Agile maturity assessment, a little survey for you that you can do now after this webinar. And it will help you reflect on your current priorities. Are you working on the right things at the moment? And if you want to, at the end of this, it's roughly a 3-minute survey. If at the end of this, we will obviously get the results, we'll send you the results, but also you will be able to say, okay, I am open to talk to other practitioners. I am open to talk, to others who are in the same stage as I am in our Agile roadmap, because that's what we will do. We'll try to connect you then with other practitioners to make sure that you can, at least the two parties can share your experiences and maybe learn from each other. You don't have to be open to that. You can just do the Agile maturity assessment if you want. But also you could, if you want, be connected to other companies who are in the same stage as you are. So feel free to do so. You should see this again on this bottom left of the screen. And then, yes, the last thing. If you want more support in your Agile transformation, if you want to, again, increase the chances that you are succeeding, you can test Ecometer for free. As you obviously have seen, Ecometer is sponsoring all of Project Scagile. Just a quick sentence. What is Ecometer doing? Ecometer is basically combining the right agile metrics and setting the right cultural metrics and goals with the right follow-up process, which means basically we are helping you in your retrospectives and help you talk about the right things, the right cultural things in your retrospective to make sure that through our health checks, you are heading in the right direction and that at least the cultural part of your transformation is heading in the right direction. So what you can do is you could join, if you want to see Ecometer, you could join our monthly live demo and, just, unbindingly see, okay, what is Ecometer doing, and then check if this could be relevant. What you could also do is start directly a free trial of Ecometer. That typically means that you are using Ecometer in 2 to 10 teams for roughly 4 to 8 weeks, depending on what's the best in your case, and then you would test out Ecometer in the retrospectives of your teams, remote or on site, depending on your situation. So feel free to do whatever you like. At the bottom left of the corner, you can go for these different ways now to proceed to help you in your agile transformation. I really hope that you liked the webinar, and hopefully see you next time. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.